On August 2nd, 1968, a powerful tremor shook Luzon, the largest island in the Philippines. What became known as the Casiguran earthquake had a magnitude of 7.3 and a rating of 9, violent, on the Mercalli intensity scale. Its epicenter was in a city of the same name, located in the northeast of Luzon, about 200 kilometers from the Philippines' then capital, Quezon City. But the most disastrous consequence occurred in Manila proper, situated about 10 kilometers southwest of Quezon and over 212 kilometers from the quake's epicenter in Casiguran. The seismic force caused a high-rise building known as the Ruby Tower to collapse, burying hundreds of its occupants and resulting in the deaths of 268 people. These constituted the overwhelming majority of the total death toll of the disaster, estimated to be 271 people. The collapse was attributed to the building's design and construction quality. The Ruby Tower had been built at a cut-price cost of around $250,000, or about $2.5 million today. It was constructed to house 600 to 1,000 people, as well as various commercial enterprises. However, it was built using shoddy materials on unsound foundations close to Manila's Pasig River mouth. The quake became referred to by many as the Ruby Tower earthquake, laying bare the extreme vulnerability of structures in Manila, which led, despite the efforts of rescuers, to the unnecessary deaths of hundreds. Unfortunately, this risk likely persists in the city. Manila has since become, by some margin, the most densely populated city on Earth, and the presence of such unsound structures, well, they haven't gone away. Perhaps unsurprisingly, despite being the most densely populated city in the world, Manila isn't exceptional in terms of its actual population size. With around 1.8 million inhabitants, the capital of the Philippines is about the same size as Warsaw, the capital of Poland, or only marginally bigger than the US city of Phoenix. In fact, Manila isn't even the most populous city in the Philippines. That title belongs to Quezon City, located directly adjacent to Manila, which has just under 3 million inhabitants. Both cities are part of the metropolitan area on Luzon, known simply as Metro Manila. Metro Manila is a vast patchwork of 16 separate cities, all within a few kilometers of each other. Most of these have populations of around 500,000, and the collective population of the region is estimated to be around 15 million. The large number of cities in Metro Manila that aren't actually Manila can lead to some confusion, understandably. For example, in 1975, Muhammad Ali fought Joe Frazier in the Philippines in what remains one of the most famous boxing matches in history. But the thriller in Manila didn't actually take place in Manila. It was in Quezon City, at the time still the capital of the Philippines. Capital city status was passed back to Manila just 1 year later, in 1976. But it's not the population count that's the chief cause of Manila being so densely packed. It's its physical size. While Metro Manila is relatively spacious at about 619 square kilometers or 239 square miles, Manila City is simply tiny. The city boundaries cover about 42.5 square kilometers, about 1/4 the land area of the Principality of Liechtenstein, which has a total population of about 40,000 people. If you were to cross the entire city of Manila from north to south, you could do so in a little over 2 hours on foot. This starkly contrasts with Warsaw, which you'll recall is roughly comparable in population size. To cross Warsaw on foot would take you no less than 6 hours. Meanwhile, to cross Phoenix, also comparable to Manila in population, would take as much as 15. To put it another way, Manila's entire population of almost 2 million people is crammed into a parcel of land about 2/3 the size of Scranton, Pennsylvania. This results in a population density in Manila of an eye-watering 45,000 people per square kilometer, or 118,000 per square mile. Manila has twice the population density of New York City, and an average of about 200 people residing on every American football field-sized piece of land. To accommodate this, the city is dotted with high-rise buildings, with no fewer than 215 structures in Manila standing at 150 meters or taller. That said, Manila's skyscrapers pale in size compared to the megastructures of Chinese and American cities. The Metrobank Center, the tallest building in Manila and the Philippines, doesn't even rank among the tallest 100 buildings on the planet. Even so, the large number of high-rises does help account for the steep population density to some extent. Manila's area may be less than 43 square kilometers, but its urban center, the city area when counting the floor space of built infrastructure, is around 1,873 square kilometers, about 3 times that of Warsaw. If counting this area, Manila's city density falls to a lower but still extremely high figure of around 22,000 per square kilometre. However, as one might predict, that urban area isn't shared equally by its residents, known in the Philippines as the Manileños. The vast majority of Manila's impoverished populations are squashed into shanty towns on the city's periphery. While the central middle-class district of San Miguel, home to the presidential palace, has a population density of 20,000 people per square kilometre, the northwestern district of Tondo has a density of around 75,000 people, with 650,000 residents crammed into just 8.5 square kilometres. The overcrowded districts are vulnerable to disease, pollution, and other related problems, and are highly exposed to a wide array of natural disasters like the Ruby Tower quake, as we'll see a little bit later. So, how did this all come to be? Well, modern-day Manila was founded in the 1500s by Spanish settlers as a city named Intramuros. People had, in fact, already lived at the mouth of the Pasig River for centuries before this, and a city of mostly Bruneian Muslim colonists named Manila was founded there in the 13th century. The Bruneians were conquered and expelled by the Spanish in 1571, although the walls of the old settlements were preserved as the margins of the new one, with the Spanish city name translating into English as Between the Walls. The city reverted to the name Manila 3 years later and became the capital of the Spanish East Indies in 1595. The old district of Intramuros remains one of Manila's most prominent neighborhoods to this day, housing its university belt and multiple colonial-style buildings. Manila preserved its capital status beyond the Philippines' independence in 1898 and through the turbulence of the Philippine-American War, which began the following year. It lost this status in 1941 after Quezon City was established, but regained it in 1976, the year after Ali and Frazier did battle in Quezon's Araneta Coliseum. Unusually, from 1903, the Philippines also had a summer capital, the city of Baguio, further north on Luzon Island. But this status, in practice, ended in 1976. In the wake of American colonization after the Philippine-American War, and as Manila grew in both status and population, U.S. architect Daniel Burnham, proponents of the so-called City Beautiful architectural movement, arrived to revolutionize the cityscape. Burnham's 1904 plans largely copied the physical features and layout of several European cities, resulting in some eye-catching architecture and city designs in Manila. But much of his plan was laid to waste in 1945 when the United States and the Philippines, this time fighting together, waged a ruinous battle to dislodge the Japanese occupation. The Battle of Manila devastated the city, upending not only the Burnham Plan, but practically the entirety of Intramuros and many of Manila's historic buildings. More tragically, the fighting flattened the homes of hundreds of thousands of residents, and around 100,000 people were killed as retreating Japanese forces carried out a frenzied slaughter of the local population. Since then, civil administrators have periodically attempted to restart the century-old plans for the city, but the steep rise in population and the vanishing of available space have made this impractical. Moreover, Burnham had crafted a plan for a city intended to accommodate a maximum of 800,000 people, and his blueprints to accomplish even that were not fully realized in his lifetime. At the time he began the project, Manila had a population of some 200,000. That population has since climbed to almost 2 million, many arriving in the years and decades after 1945 to a city long struggling to recover from the devastating effects of the war. The need to build large structures capable of accommodating the growing population resulted in the hasty creation of buildings like the Ruby Tower, but also in the rapid rise of residents in districts like Tondo, which grew to over 500,000 people by 1990. Now, over time, practically every last inch of ground came to be occupied. Even the former shipyard in Manila's port area became a dense residential neighborhood after President Ferdinand Marcos resettled urban poor into the area in the late 1970s. Today, what's known as the Paseco compound has a population of almost 70,000 people residing on a patch of land roughly the same size as Vatican City. As Manila's rapid growth continued unabated, the city quite simply ran out of space. In 2010, The Guardian writer Jenny Kleeman stood dumbfounded as a Manila local pried open the coffin of a dead resident and cleared away the man's remains by hand to make room for someone else. This morbid practice is born out of necessity. There's so little available space in Manila that even gravesites in some of the city's poorer districts can only be rented, not owned. Locals have been known to swap out the graves of the deceased in the event of non-payment of rent by the dead person's descendants. The same Guardian article estimated that up to a third of Manila's population, which in 2010 stood at a little over 1.6 million, was living in makeshift settlements on any precious piece of spare land available. The problem is unlikely to have improved over time. The population is soaring, driven in part by high birth rates in a religious society and by large streams of migrants arriving from poorer parts of the Philippine archipelago in search of work. Paradoxically, in this regard, Manila is a victim of its own success. The Philippines stands as one of the fastest growing economies in Asia, racing forward in the fields of tech, sustainable energy, and, ironically, real estate. Metro Manila is considered an economic powerhouse in Asia, and Manila is a key part of this economic surge. The massive influx of residents into the region has led to an urban sprawl visible on satellite images as the outlying settlements close to the capital have expanded outward towards Quezon and the Luzon Island hinterlands. But in the tight confines of Manila City, the problem has reached a tipping point. Given the extreme shortage of space, many of the new arrivals end up residing in unregistered housing where disease and squalor are rife. Pneumonia, tuberculosis, and dengue fever are common ailments that claim thousands of lives a year in the city slums. And if health problems weren't enough, Manila happens to be prone to some of the most serious ravages posed by nature to any major city in the world. The entire region of Metro Manila lies close to the epicenters of what are ominously known as the Ring of Fire and the Pacific Typhoon Belt, sites of regular volcanic activity and tropical cyclones, respectively. Its hazardous geographical location makes the region prone to flooding, storms, landslides, mudslides, volcanic eruptions, and drought. In fact, natural disasters are so common in Metro Manila that they're enumerated on their own dedicated Wikipedia page. And while earthquakes are rare, the Casiguran disaster showed not only that they can occur, but also what their consequences might just be. Worse, Manila lies directly on a major seismic line known as the West Valley Fault, which, like Cascadia and San Andreas, is statistically due for a major event. And if the big one does strike, it's estimated that this would result in at least tens of thousands of deaths. While a major earthquake of such scale hasn't shaken the region for several hundred years, cyclones and typhoons have certainly devastated parts of the city in the recent past. When Tropical Storm Ondoy struck in 2009, it unleashed a terrible fury that left at least 241 dead in Metro Manila and brought wanton devastation upon the shanty towns home to much of the population. Residents were forced to take cover wherever possible, and remarkably, even the Malacanang Palace, residence of the President of the Philippines, was used to shelter locals. But those most at risk from the storm proved to be those residing in the precarious temporary homes dotting the landscape. The presence of the shantytowns even reduced the robustness of more reinforced parts of Manila against the storm. Aside from rampant disease combined with risks of natural disaster in Manila's overcrowded settlements, the severe demographic saturation has led to other problems affecting the population more broadly. One of these is congestion. Manila ranks as one of the worst cities in the world for hours lost to traffic, resulting in an average travel time of 27 minutes and 20 seconds and an average of 105 hours lost to traffic per resident annually. Road transportation is compounded by the sheer volume of different types of vehicles used by commuters, ranging from cars, buses, and taxis to three-wheelers, motorcycles, and various types of jeepneys and rickshaws, as well as unique horse-drawn carriages used in parts of the old town known as Calasas. The cumulative effect of vehicles vying for space on the roads contributes to steep transit times, as well as pollution and highway deterioration. Rail transport exists, but largely connects Manila with the outlying cities of the metropolitan region. Most internal rail transit declined massively after World War II, including the famous tranvia streetcar system, which was obliterated beyond salvage during the Japanese rampage in 1945. Now, admittedly, being the most densely populated city in the world would almost by default lead to steep congestion. Given the sheer number of residents, it's a wonder that Manila doesn't occupy the first place for traffic, let alone barely scraping the top 10, according to the traffic index aggregator TomTom. But Manila's problems do not stop there. Manila has an acute drainage problem. The absence of effective drainage has exacerbated periodic floods, leading to extended chaos during typhoons and other severe weather periods. The failure to implement key parts of the Burnham plan has worsened the city's drainage woes. Another issue is that sprawling shantytowns have extended even into the existing floodways built to contain floodwaters. In the wake of Tropical Storm Ondoy, a report by disaster prevention researchers noted that buildings erected in the channels of the Mangahan floodway close to Manila City had reduced their effectiveness during severe flooding. Moreover, while Manila sits at an average elevation of 9 meters and up to 108 meters at its highest, the same report noted that illegal dwellings had sprung up in parts of the city lying effectively level with the Pasig River and Manila Bay, rendering them even more prone to sudden water level rises. Schools, well, they're overburdened, and it's not unheard of for children in poor districts to attend classes in shifts. At Manila's maternity hospitals, several mothers at a time regularly share available beds. A Manila City Jail is one of the most overcrowded in the world, housing 6,300 inmates in 2019 in a facility built for around 1,000. Much of the overpopulation was a result of President Rodrigo Duterte's infamous drug crackdown, and the severe overcrowding meant that COVID-19 ravaged the facility when the pandemic began 1 year later. Manila continues to struggle under the weight of its population density, but that doesn't mean the state hasn't made several stringent efforts to curb the problem. In 2017, then President Duterte began a massive infrastructure project intended to provide much-needed buildings to Metro Manila, as well as to encourage economic growth and reduce congestion and poverty. The creatively named Build, Build, Build program saw the construction of new expressways, bridges, and rail systems aimed at improving connectivity between the cities of the region and easing the transit chaos within them. The program also established the Clark Freeport Zone, a business hub intended to draw industries and residents away from the capital to a new location in Pampanga. That's 57 kilometers north of Manila. After Duarte left office in 2022, the program was overtaken by the Build Better More plan, introduced by new president Bongbong Marcos. The plan inherited 77 ongoing projects and greenlit a further 123 aimed at improving public transport, health, water resources, and agricultural projects, among others. The government also intensified efforts to provide socialized housing and to relocate informal settlers away from temporary housing neighborhoods, such as through the 4PH program, which aims to construct 1 million housing units per year across Metro Manila. To facilitate such relocations, plans were unveiled during the Duarte era for the so-called Project of the Century, the construction of a 21-kilometer Metro Manila subway line connecting the cities of Quezon, Valenzuela, Pasig, Taguig, Paranaque, and Pasay. The subway is expected to be operational by 2029 and is partly funded, ironically, by loans from the Japanese government and overseen by a Japanese consulting consortium. Some of the government's efforts are remarkable, given that many of the problems experienced by Manila weren't necessarily the handwork of the Philippines itself. Some are the product of a city designed during a bygone era by a colonial entity for a far smaller population. Others are the consequence of the cataclysmic devastation wrought by the Battle of Manila in 1945, and others still are the work of the cyclical natural disasters that periodically affect the region. But the plans may not be enough. Despite all these regenerative efforts, the future of Manila is uncertain. Around the time Duarte announced his Build, Build, Build program, he also stated that the traffic and poverty of Manila might be impossible to overhaul, infamously declaring that the capital would become a dead city within 25 years. Duarte added that the government should focus on state infrastructure and development projects elsewhere, and proceeded with the establishment of the Clark Business Hub and expansion of Clark International Airport, both in Pampanga. Such a shift would hardly be unprecedented, as many of Manila's elites left the city en masse following the devastation of 1945, and the entire government was relocated to Quezon City, which rapidly became the most populous city in the Philippines, only a matter of decades after its foundation. But despite the ambitious building projects carried out by the Philippines to draw citizens away from the overwhelmed capital, there may be another problem. People simply don't want to leave. Given the sheer number of people living in Manila and Metro Manila alike, combined with the accelerated population growth, it's likely that even in the best-case scenario, if all projects are completed successfully, it still wouldn't provide the requisite conditions for residents to abandon normality for life elsewhere. Such a reality could mean leaving destitution in one area in return for poverty and unfamiliarity in another. In Manila, Plans continue to build whatever infrastructure is possible to offset the extreme problems of the world's most densely populated city. But these efforts remain hampered by the lack of available space on which to build, and some are even opposed by urban conservationists due to the risk of tarnishing the historic legacy of Manila's picturesque old buildings. One of the key additions to Manila City under the Build, Build, Build program was the Binondo Intramuros Bridge, completed in 2022 as an important thoroughfare linking Intramuros with the northern districts of Binondo and San Nicolas across the Pasig River. But the bridge was opposed by some heritage groups due to its stark contrast with Intramuros's remaining Spanish colonial architecture, including the famous San Agustin Church, one of the very few to survive the devastation of the Battle of Manila in 1945. As Manila's problems grow, the Pearl of the Orient continues to grapple with containing them. Here's hoping it will succeed in doing so. Thank you for watching.